Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
ABC Wednesday.
I'm Joan, and I'm your first Golden Bachelorette.
Joan's getting a second chance.
This is about everybody like me, navigating, trying to find love at this age.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't have hope.
Because love never ages.
Golden age doesn't mean you're old. Old is a state of mind, like a lot of living to do.
The Golden Bachelorette. Series premiere Wednesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits, including personal shoutouts, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and more. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note, sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Of all the spooky, scary, and haunting stories and topics out there in the world, the thing that scares me the most are home invasions. There's just something horrifying about an invasion of one's personal space, particularly when that space is supposed to be a sanctuary and a place of comfort and rest. But what happens when you combine a good old-fashioned urban legend with the terrifying reality of a home invasion? You come out with a classic story, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. A common horror trope, there are several movies using the premise as a major plot point. This story is guaranteed to make your skin crawl and your hair stand on end. In this episode of The Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the all-too-real Babysitter and the Man Upstairs urban legend. Is it a fictional story? Or is there some horrifying, real-life parallel that forms the basis of the urban legend? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. According to legend, one night a young woman was babysitting several children. It was dark outside, and a storm was rolling in quickly. As lightning lit up the living room, and thunder roared overhead. She turned the volume up on the television to keep the kids from being afraid. As the show flashed across the screen, she heard the faint sound of the telephone ringing in the kitchen. She walked over and picked up the receiver. Hello? No response. No. Wait. She heard faint breathing on the other end. Hello? The breathing became louder. Hello? This time, she heard the click of the receiver, followed by dial tone. Returning to the living room, one of the children asked who called. Not wanting to alarm them, despite being unsettled herself, she said, I think it was a wrong number. She sat back down, and they all watched television, uneventfully, for another hour. Then, she got the kids tucked into bed and walked back downstairs. The phone rang in the kitchen. Hello? Raspy breathing. Hello? At first, the breathing deepened. Then, he spoke. I'll be there soon. Click, dial tone. She hung up the phone and stepped back in confusion. Must have been a wrong number or prank call, she thought to herself. The phone rang again, and she answered. Hello? Raspy breathing, followed by laughter. Lock your doors, or else. Click, dial tone. Now she was afraid. Amidst the silence of the house, she could practically hear her heart pounding in her chest. Then, she heard the footsteps. Not too heavy, not too soft. Almost like someone was moving quietly down the hallway. Again, she rationalized it. It must be one of the kids going to the bathroom. She walked upstairs, and one by one checked the rooms, only to find the kids sound asleep. Surely, at least one of them had walked the hallway just a few seconds before. As she stood there confused and trying to make sense of what she'd heard, the telephone rang again. This time she ran down the stairs, yanked the receiver, and screamed, "What do you want?" No words, just raspy breathing. Then, "I'm coming for you," followed by a click and the dial tone. Amidst the panic, a brilliant thought pressed into her mind. Call the operator. She turned the 0 on the old rotary phone and waited for the voice on the other side. "Operator, how may I help you?" "I'd like you to trace the location of the last phone call to this number." "Hold, please." Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt like hours. "Hello, ma'am, can you hear me?" It was the operator. "Yes, I'm here. What did you find out?" Silence. Then the operator spoke. "We traced the call to a phone in the house. It's coming from inside your house. If you're in danger, get out now." From inside the house. Her voice trailed off as she heard strong, heavy footsteps coming down the staircase. The story you just heard is a variation of a famous urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. The legend picked up steam in the 1960s and has a simple premise. A teenage babysitter receives a series of strange phone calls, which after some time, she discovers are coming from somewhere in the house. One variation of the legend tells of the babysitter receiving a phone call directing her to check on the children. Initially, the babysitter dismisses the phone call, but becomes increasingly fearful after subsequent phone calls from the stranger. She ultimately calls the police, who agree to trace the next call. After the mysterious stranger calls again, the police call her back and tell her to leave the house immediately, as the calls are coming from inside the home. She does this, and after the police arrive and investigate, they find the children murdered in the upstairs bedrooms. The exact origins of the urban legend are unknown, but it is believed to be loosely based on a horrific murder in 1950 in Columbia, Missouri. On March 18, 1950, 13-year-old Janett Christman was asked to babysit for a few hours by Ed and Ann Romack, who wanted to play cards with some friends. Janett, who was a few days shy of her 14th birthday, agreed, as she wanted to earn some extra money. An 8th grader at Jefferson Junior High School, Janett was considered mature for her age and was often selected to babysit because of this. On that fateful night, it was raining and cold outside. Janett's father dropped her off at the Romacks between 7 and 7:30 p.m. The child she was babysitting for was already asleep, so it appeared that it would be an easy, quiet evening. Something interesting. Before leaving the home, Ed Romack gave Janett a brief tutorial on, quote, how to load, unload, and fire his shotgun that he kept near the door, end quote. She was instructed to keep the front door locked, not to open the door for anyone she didn't know, and to turn the porch light on if someone knocked on the door. Shortly after arriving at their friend's house, Ann Romack called her home to check on her son, but the line rang with no answer. She didn't think anything of it. Then, at 10:30 p.m., police received a phone call from a frantic young woman screaming for help. "Come quick," she screamed. Then silence. Unfortunately, the police were unable to track the location of the call and did not have an address to send a patrol car. At 1 a.m., the Romacks returned home and immediately noticed the porch light was on. Remember, they'd instructed Janett to turn it on only if someone knocked on the door. They noticed something else, something odd. A sawhorse sitting outside one of the windows. A sawhorse is, quote, a sturdy frame support made of plastic, wood, or metal that helps to support a piece of material that is being cut, end quote. A quick content warning before we continue. The following contains graphic descriptions of physical assault, sexual assault, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Upon entering the home, the Romacks first noticed the door was unlocked, indicating someone had been let in. Within seconds, they discovered a horrifying scene. Just inside the front entrance was Janett Christman. She was lying on the ground in a pool of her own blood. She had a severe head wound and what appeared to be puncture marks on her face. One article described the position of Janett's body, stating, quote, her legs had been spread apart and her skirt pulled up. There were scratches on her face, and the cord from an electric iron was wrapped around her neck, end quote. The living room window was broken from the outside, with shards covering the living room carpet. The Romacks rushed upstairs to find their son, Gregory, unharmed. On the floor in the living room, beside Janett's body, was the phone she'd used to call the police. A police investigation determined Janett Christman, quote, had been bludgeoned about the head and sexually assaulted before being strangled to death. With no signs of an actual break-in to be found, it appeared that the young victim had willingly let someone into the house that night. This led to speculation that her killer was an individual she not only knew, but also trusted. End quote. At this point you might be thinking, but wasn't the living room window broken into from outside? It appears the perpetrator attempted to stage a break-in and robbery. However, police were unconvinced about this and settled on the theory that whoever killed Janett Christman was at least familiar to her. The rest of the story is as scary as it is tragic. Investigators ultimately zeroed in on a prime suspect, 27-year-old Robert Mueller, who confessed to an infatuation with the teenage girl. A pedophile, Mueller made sexually inappropriate comments about Janett to others, including Ed Romack. Mueller was familiar with the Romacks' home and played cards with Ed and Ann on the night of Janett's murder. In fact, Robert Mueller left the card game at approximately 10 p.m., stating he had to go home because he had a sick child. Police detectives quickly discovered that Robert Mueller never went home and could not account for the missing hour after he left the game and when he came back. Despite the circumstantial evidence, police had no physical evidence to tie him to Janett's murder, and after questioning, they released him without charges. Likewise, a grand jury decided there was insufficient evidence to charge or convict Robert Mueller with the crime. To this day, nearly 75 years later, the murder of Janett Christman remains unsolved. I mentioned earlier that the babysitter and the man upstairs is both an urban legend and a common horror trope. In fact, it toes the line between reality and fiction. And even now, more than 60 years after it hit the mainstream, scary testimonies about the man upstairs persist to this day. One scary encounter was posted by a deleted Reddit user, which is likely a throwaway account. Quote, "Good day, everyone. This is something that happened this past Friday while I was babysitting. For a little bit of context, I'm a 21-year-old female college student and have been babysitting since I was 14. I'm not an expert on literally anything. However, over the years, I have learned caution and resilience. At age 15, I took babysitting classes at our youth center, as well as a female self-defense course. I babysit at least once a month for this one family. I like them because they pay me more than my usual hourly rate. They have a big house with internet that I can use to do homework, and the two kids are surprisingly well-behaved and compliant. So the two parents have a monthly ritual of going out around 5 p.m. and returning a little after 2 a.m. I'm always offered the chance to sleep in the guest bedroom and stay until morning. I usually just stay awake and use their satellite TV, and then leave when they come back. The house is in a nice neighborhood, without a whole lot of neighbors. It's very quiet. Their house is armed with an alarm system that I have the code to and can arm and disarm through my phone. That'll be relevant in a little while. I always take the kids out for pizza at this place that has an arcade. I do this so they tire themselves out and go to bed early. Plus, the little girl that I babysit for is also on a mission to win a, quote, family, end quote, of stuffed animals from the prize store. So I'd be the world's worst babysitter if I didn't guide her in that pursuit. If anyone is wondering for whatever reason, after Friday night, she only needs the daddy stuffed animal before her collection is complete. Anyway, I'm rambling. I was sitting at a table and watching them play in a ball pit while also texting on my phone. This couple came over and sat at the same table as me. It was a long table, with parents scattered here and there, so this wasn't alarming. The couple looked normal enough. Both were probably in their mid-20s, possibly a little older. They talked to each other, but then the guy asked me, "Are you the one babysitting Dr. So-and-so's kids?" The parents of these children are both doctors, and the specific region that we live in, this would be common enough information. But I still chose to answer their question with an irrelevant statement. I wonder what they use to make the pizza here. Yeah, I know. I'm a master of deception, and I deserve an Oscar for my performance. However, they seemed to see right through my clever ruse. They started making weird comments. They talked about the kid's parents. They commented on the daughter, and how they wondered if she would look as pretty as their mom. Okay, guys, I don't know if that was intended to be creepy, but I'm just going to be safe and pretend that it was. Then the woman says to me, and I quote, "Do they really let you dress like that while watching their kids?" End quote. She motioned with her eyes towards my t-shirt, which was not revealing. It's 90 degrees in my region of the US right now, so it's not like I can wear a hoodie. I saw that as my cue to go and get the kiddos and bring them to get their prizes so that we could leave. After a few minutes of thought-provoking philosophical debating, they both got their prizes, and we headed back over to the house. Fast forward a few hours. Both kids were bathed and put to sleep. It was around 9 p.m. I was caught up on homework and was just watching TV when I heard some movement on the porch. I didn't think much of it at first, but then the doorknob started rattling violently. I initially started moving towards the front door to see who it was, but miraculously I remembered that it was late at night. I was home alone with 2 kids, and I very much wanted to live. I turned around to grab my purse, which is where I keep my taser. As I'm moving, the back door starts rattling as well, and was accompanied by some banging noises. That's when I remembered that I hadn't enabled the alarm system after returning. Now, if this was a horror movie scenario, of course the alarm wouldn't have worked, and the intruders would have made their way inside. I hate to disappoint you if you were expecting something more exciting, but I enabled it again quite easily with no incident. I ran upstairs and grabbed the 2 kids. I put them in their parents' room in the walk-in closet. I still hate that I scared them. When I gathered them up, I gave no context as to what was going on. I didn't want to tell them that someone was trying to break into the house, but in the process, the fear of not knowing seemed to be worse. I instructed them to stay in there and stay quiet, and only to open the door if they heard me talking to them. I then locked the bedroom door, which is the only door on the upstairs floor that locks. I sat there with my taser out and hit the panic button on the phone app. Several minutes went by. Then I got the notification through the app that the alarm system was disabled. I planned on calling 911, even though the panic button already took care of it. But I found it more beneficial to arm it back. Then it disarmed again. So I armed it again. Then it disarmed again, and I armed it once again. By this time, I could hear what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps walking up the stairs. Good job. You locked yourself inside with 2 potential assailants, I thought to myself. I was holding it together for the sake of the kids, but not too deep inside. I was scared to death. When I heard the footsteps get near the door and saw the knob twisting, I took a deep breath and pulled the trigger on my taser, just to let them know that I was armed, even though it realistically wouldn't do much good. I informed them through the door that the alarm was triggered and the police were on their way. Thankfully, I was greeted by a familiar voice. "It's Doctor. You're safe." I opened the door and ran into their arms and started sobbing. I hadn't realized until it was over just how scared I really was. The kids came out, without me giving them the okay, but their parents were there, so it was fine. When I enabled the alarm on my phone, they both got the notification from the place they were at. With the app, you have the option to view the front porch cameras as well. When they got the notification that the panic button was activated, they saw through the camera that there were people on each side of the house. 1 man and 1 woman. When the alarm kept disarming, that was them trying to get into the house. They filed a police report and gave a statement mentioning the 2 weirdos I met earlier that day, even though there was really no evidence that would directly point to them. Camera footage didn't give any positive IDs either. So yeah, I was scared. I'm just now getting over it. And I'm grateful that the couple that I was babysitting for were close enough to make it to me. I hate to say it, but I find the police response time to be terrible. I'm currently back in my own apartment an hour away. I checked in once to see how the kids were doing, and they're holding up fine. I'm just glad they had proper protection in their home, and that this didn't end up being any worse." End quote. Our second story is from Reddit user Christaboo14. Quote, "When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins, aged 8, 4, and 1, in an extremely rural mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had a wedding to go to over an hour away and wouldn't be back until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill below, leading down to a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half-mile away. The closest main road was a mile away. And at night, there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where to go in order to get there. You don't just accidentally end up at their house. My aunt and uncle left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline. This was the early 2000s, and I didn't have a cell phone. But even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway. Then they headed out. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off. And the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up on the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old. And there was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. This description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left driveway. There is a large open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle, and anyone who ever visited, parked. The right driveway led down a very short, but very steep hill to a large leveled-out area, which ended against the garage door, which then opened onto the basement of the house. This was a normal door with a window, so you could see right in. This driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat yard-like area on the property. And being on a mountainside, there isn't much room to safely play otherwise. No cars ever drove down there. Ever. There were too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew this. It was about 10 p.m. and pitch black outside, with no moon to illuminate the area at all. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye. They weren't my aunt's minivan headlights. They were huge truck headlights with those roof lights you often see on Jeeps or other off-road trucks. Not only that, but the truck was also going down the right driveway, the kids' play area. This was not my aunt and uncle, and this was not anyone they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl, alone in an isolated house, on a mountain at night, with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake, do you know whose truck that is?" And then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure of what to do. But the 2 little ones were sleeping down there, and I wanted to make sure they were safe. I checked on the baby and then grabbed the phone to call 911. And then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened that garage door. More panic filled me. I heard them try the door beside it. The metal doorknob was jiggling. No one was knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there. Plus the lights were out. It was dark down there, and they knew no one was there. They were breaking in. The door leading to the basement steps was right next to the phone, so I could clearly hear all of this going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob just in case they did make it to the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest. I'm talking to the 911 dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clung to my arm. The operator was calm and was trying to calm me, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get up there, assuming they didn't get totally lost on the mountainside in the pitch dark. I just kept thinking, we are fucked. We are dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with the number on it, and to my absolute horror, I saw a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" tall man with long scraggly red hair and a big red bushy beard. And what made it worse, he was grinning at me, grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have had looked terrified, like a deer in the headlights. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was a second man behind him, though I couldn't see him as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but I do know that he was equally as tall. and maybe a bit lankier than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed at the 911 dispatcher, "Oh God, they're here!" And before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin could answer, I turned my attention to the man in the door. "I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. I'm grateful he didn't try that door because I do not think it was locked. The man stared at me hard for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like he was deciding what he wanted to do next. Then, he just backed away into the darkness. After what seemed like an eternity later, I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like it was a close family friend. And obviously, because again he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that driveway. The 911 operator asked for a description of the man, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle, and they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a bit later to make sure the men were gone. And they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home so they could ask them some questions. My uncle was furious. Not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'm gonna fuck him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back to the house again. I didn't know it at the time, but my uncle had a drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police. But that grin was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known that my uncle was not there, because the basement was dark. He would have seen through the windowed basement door. He had also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement. That much is clear to me. There is no explanation. I never did babysit for them again, and I don't think I ever went back up there, because not long after this, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. End quote. If I'm honest, the entirety of this episode gives me chills. That the one place in the entire world could become a horrific crime scene really sends a chill down my spine. The still unsolved murder of Janett Christman and the circumstantial evidence surrounding Robert Mueller leaves me unsettled. A teenager, a child, abused, assaulted, and murdered. The crime is as senseless as it is tragic. And frankly, the close calls aren't any less scary. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. Is the babysitter and the man upstairs nothing more than an urban legend? Or is it more a case of fiction imitating real life? I've shared the stories. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.